At first glance, the gas station seems to be one of the most stable fixtures of modern life. Its architecture is stripped to the essentials: the canopy, the pumps, the glowing signage, neon beacons scattered across highways and neighborhoods, promising a simple transaction. You arrive with a near-empty tank, you leave with the assurance of mobility. For more than a century, the gas station has been an almost sacred node in the infrastructure of everyday life, the portal between human ambition and mechanical endurance. But here lies the paradox. The very substance that gives the gas station its identity, gasoline, is also the one that yields it almost no profit. Margins on fuel are razor thin, sometimes mere pennies per gallon. A global industry worth trillions, condensed at the retail level into something so fragile that it can barely sustain itself. To put it plainly, gas stations do not survive by selling gas. Instead, their survival depends on everything around the pump: cigarettes, energy drinks, bottled water priced higher than oil itself, fried food under fluorescent heat lamps. All these become the lifeblood of an institution that outwardly appears to be about fuel. The gas in gas stations, we discover, is more performance than profit, more illusion than reality. This is not just an odd quirk of the market. It is a parable of late capitalism, a system in which the visible product is not the real commodity, where survival depends on hidden margins and the ability to exploit attention, habit, and impulse. Gas stations teach us something about the architecture of modern consumption, that what we believe we are buying and what we are truly paying for are not the same thing. Consider this: in the United States, there are over 145,000 gas stations, and yet, over the past 2 decades, independent operators have been steadily vanishing, replaced by chains that rely less on fuel than on retail strategy. The gas station has morphed into something stranger than a fueling hub. It is part mini-mart, part fast food outlet, part surveillance node, part cultural symbol. We often imagine the gas station as being primarily about gasoline. In reality, the pump is only part of the picture. It is the margins, the chips, the soda, the tobacco that sustain the business, revealing a contradiction that mirrors the way the wider economy functions. This video is not simply about gas stations. It is about the dissonance between appearance and reality in commerce itself. It is about the way businesses present one thing but profit from another, the way consumers become complicit in a system they don't fully perceive. So let us begin with a question. When you pull into a gas station, are you refueling your car, or are you fueling something much larger, more hidden, and more unsettling? The irony begins with the pump itself. When most people think of gas stations, they imagine that their primary revenue flows from the sale of fuel. The pump is the centerpiece. The glowing digital meter tallying dollars and gallons is the object we interact with most directly. Yet in the strange arithmetic of the fuel economy, the pump is not a wellspring of profit, but a carefully managed illusion. Consider this: the average gas station earns only 2 to 7 cents per gallon of fuel sold. In a country where the average fill-up might be 12 gallons, that transaction nets the station less than $1. In many cases, it is less profitable than selling a single pack of gum at the counter. The issue is that gasoline pricing is caught in a relentless squeeze between global volatility and consumer psychology. Oil is priced on international markets, its cost fluctuating by the hour depending on geopolitical tensions, refinery capacity, seasonal demand, or even storms in the Gulf of Mexico. Stations cannot simply adjust their prices at whim without facing competitive backlash. If the station across the street lowers its price by 2 cents, customers defect instantly. For decades, motorists have been trained to view gasoline as a commodity, fungible and interchangeable, its only differentiator being the visible price posted on towering roadside signs. The result is a peculiar paradox. Gas stations must sell gasoline in order to exist, but they cannot truly profit from it. The pump is a loss leader, a lure, a decoy, a magnet drawing customers into the orbit of the store. This reveals something profound about the architecture of commerce itself. The very thing we imagine to be central is often peripheral. It is a theater of necessity. Gas stations are compelled to maintain the illusion that they are in the fuel business, when in fact, they are in the convenience business. This dynamic is not new. Since the rise of the automobile in the early 20th century, the story of fuel retail has always been entangled with illusion. In the 1920s, when the first roadside filling stations emerged, they were often designed with elaborate facades, some built to resemble cottages, others as miniature temples. The idea was not just to sell gasoline, but to cloak the act of fueling in familiarity and trust. Companies like Texaco and Shell cultivated brand identity through architecture, uniforms, and color schemes, projecting stability onto what was, even then, a volatile trade. By the 1970s, the illusion grew more fragile. Oil shocks and embargoes revealed just how vulnerable the supply chain was, and gas stations became flashpoints of public frustration. Long lines and price spikes made clear that the pump was tethered not to local entrepreneurs, but to a global system beyond their control. What looked like a neighborhood fixture was in fact an appendage of geopolitics. And yet, despite this fragility, gas stations endured. Not because of fuel profits, but because of everything else they sold. In 2022, the National Association of Convenience Stores reported that 70% of in-store sales at gas stations came from three categories: cigarettes, lottery tickets, and beverages, both alcohol and soda. Each of these items carries margins far higher than fuel, sometimes upward of 30% to 40%. By contrast, fuel margins average less than 2%. This means that the moment you step inside the store for a soda or a pack of cigarettes, you become more valuable to the station than your entire 12-gallon tank of gas. The gas pump is a threshold. The store is the destination. A striking comparison can be made here. The gas station is less a refueling depot than a casino lobby. The slot machines, the high-margin impulse items, are inside. The pump is merely the entry ticket. There is a deeper psychological dimension. Fuel prices are hyper-visible. They are emblazoned on massive roadside signs, updated daily, broadcast on news cycles, dissected in political debate. Gasoline is one of the few commodities where consumers track price fluctuations in real time and anchor their economic worldview to them. This hypervisibility creates pressure. Stations must compete on price, even though it erodes their margins. Yet paradoxically, this same visibility is what lures customers in. Drivers are conditioned to chase the lowest posted number, often driving miles out of their way for a 3-cent discount, only to buy an overpriced snack inside that erases any savings. In other words, the pump functions as psychological bait. The loss incurred on gasoline is more than compensated by the behavioral economics of the store. Fuel sales often generate margins so thin they barely keep the lights on. Credit card processing fees, averaging around 2.5% per transaction, can exceed the margin on fuel itself. On a gallon priced at $3.50, the net margin after processing may amount to less than a penny. What the gas station reveals is a broader pattern in capitalism. The product you think you're buying is rarely the one sustaining the system. Airlines, for instance, sell tickets at low margins, but make profits on baggage fees and upgrades. Movie theaters survive not on tickets, but on popcorn and soda. Printers are sold cheaply, but ink cartridges generate staggering returns. The mirage of fuel profits is part of a much larger architecture of misdirection. But here lies the provocation. What does it mean for a society when entire industries depend not on their central product, but on the peripheral impulse? What does it mean when the sustaining logic of commerce is hidden, invisible to consumers who believe they are simply buying gas? Perhaps it means we live in an economy of illusions, where survival depends not on what we produce, but on what we can obscure. If the pump is the mirage, then the convenience store is the oasis, or perhaps the trap. Step inside almost any gas station in America, and you'll find the same architecture of desire. Walls lined with brightly colored drinks, shelves stacked with salty snacks, racks of cigarettes, and lottery tickets at the register. It is not accidental. The space is engineered not as a neutral retail environment, but as a carefully constructed economic machine, designed to extract value from habits, cravings, and moments of weakness. Here, finally, the margins begin to fatten. A bottle of soda that costs less than 50 cents to produce might retail for $2.29. A pack of gum with a wholesale price under $1 sells for 3 times that amount. Cigarettes, though heavily taxed, still generate reliable returns. Lottery tickets, strips of printed paper, are miracles of profit because they sell not merely a product, but a dream. The word itself, convenience, is disarming. It suggests ease, efficiency, a minor luxury of saving time. But in truth, convenience is not just a descriptor, it is a business model. It monetizes urgency, fatigue, and the small compromises of daily life. Consider the commuter who leaves work late, too tired to cook, and grabs a microwavable burrito at the gas station, or the traveler speeding down the highway who pays $3.99 for a bottle of water rather than risk dehydration. These are not rational transactions in a classical economic sense. They are transactions born from vulnerability. The convenience store thrives not by competing with supermarkets on price, but by situating itself precisely where the consumer's defenses are lowest, in between destinations, in the liminal spaces of travel, where the cost of delay feels unbearable. In this sense, the gas station is not just a marketplace, it is a toll booth on the road of modern life, extracting micropayments from the friction of our schedules. Look closer at how these stores are laid out. Candy and chips sit near the counter, within easy reach of the hand already fishing for a credit card. Coffee stations and soda fountains dominate the center, their scale signaling abundance. The beer cooler sits at the back, forcing customers to walk past dozens of temptations before reaching it. Every decision is calculated, part of a choreography of attention. The store guides the eye, manipulates the path, amplifies the likelihood of impulse. If the pump outside operates on the logic of necessity, everyone needs fuel. The store inside operates on the logic of temptation. Statistics illuminate the stakes. According to industry reports, inside sales account for nearly 30% of revenue, but more than 70% of profit at typical gas stations. The markup on snacks and beverages ranges from 30% to 60%. In comparison, grocery stores average margins of 1% to 3%. What this means is that the convenience store is not a sideline, but the true beating heart of the enterprise. Gasoline may keep customers flowing through the door, but soda and cigarettes keep the station alive. And here lies a paradox both troubling and fascinating: the survival of the gas station, and by extension, the fueling infrastructure of modern mobility, is subsidized by our vices. This raises uncomfortable questions. Gas stations make their living not by nourishing us, but by feeding habits that, in many cases, diminish our health and well-being. Cigarettes are the leading cause of preventable death. Sugary drinks contribute to obesity and diabetes. Lottery tickets siphon billions from the poorest Americans, who are statistically the most likely to play. And yet, these are the pillars on which the gas station rests. The pump loses money, the chips and soda make it back. The structure of survival is inverted. What harms us sustains the station, while what we think sustains it, fuel, barely pays the bills. What are we to make of this inversion? That our economy is built not on serving needs, but on monetizing weaknesses. That the word convenience is merely a polite disguise for extraction. Not all convenience economies are identical. Some companies have transformed the model into something closer to cult status. Take Wawa, a regional chain in the US East Coast. Its stores are larger, brighter, more welcoming than the stereotypical dingy gas station. Wawa built its empire not on cigarettes and lottery tickets, but on food service, hoagies, coffee, and fresh-baked goods. Customers speak of Wawa with near religious devotion, describing it as both a pit stop and a cultural landmark. Or consider Buc-ee's, the Texas-based megastation. Buc-ee's turns the convenience store into spectacle. Massive complexes with hundreds of pumps, sprawling interiors, and a dizzying array of food. Buc-ee's doesn't just sell snacks, it sells an experience, a roadside attraction in itself. These examples reveal an evolution in the convenience model. It is not bound to vice alone. It can also harness culture, identity, even a kind of nostalgia. But whether the hook is cigarettes or brisket sandwiches, the underlying principle remains. The store, not the pump, is the economic core. Here is where the intellectual provocation deepens. We often imagine that technological progress liberates us, that faster cars, larger highways, and 24/7 gas stations make life easier. But in reality, each layer of progress creates new dependencies that must be serviced by another economy. Cars enabled mobility, but they also created demand for roadside refueling. Gas stations enabled fueling, but their economic survival required a second layer of commerce: snacks, sodas, cigarettes. Progress does not simplify, it complicates. It creates ecosystems of necessity, each layer feeding on the vulnerabilities created by the last. Thus, the convenience store is not a trivial footnote to the automobile age. It is a structural necessity. Without it, the entire fueling system would collapse under its own unprofitability. This invites us to broaden the question: how many of our modern institutions survive not on their stated purpose, but on hidden scaffolding? Universities rely on sports programs and real estate holdings as much as tuition. News outlets depend on advertising disguised as journalism. Social media platforms thrive not by connecting friends, but by harvesting data to sell to advertisers. The gas station convenience store, in its small way, reveals the pattern. Survival lies not in the noble function, but in the profitable side effect. And so, the question lingers. When you stop at a gas station, are you really there for fuel? Or are you a participant in a much older drama, one where the true economy hides in plain sight, camouflaged by the language of convenience? If the convenience store is the trap, then the oil company is the puppet master. To understand the economics of the gas station, one must recognize a deeper truth. Most stations are not independent businesses in any meaningful sense. They are nodes in a vast network, tethered by contracts, dictated by suppliers, trapped in a web where autonomy is more illusion than reality. The architecture of this system is obscured by branding. To the casual driver, a chevron is chevron, a shell is shell. The logo suggests corporate ownership and uniformity, but peel back the signage, and one discovers a strange paradox. The majority of gas stations are small businesses, family-owned franchises, yet they operate inside a cage built by oil conglomerates. The station owner appears to be an entrepreneur, a small business person running their store. In truth, they are more like tenants. They lease the brand, the pumps, often the land itself. They agree to sell fuel supplied by the parent company, usually at prices the franchisor dictates. Margins on gasoline, as we've seen, are razor thin, but the franchise agreement locks the owner into that margin, preventing them from sourcing cheaper fuel elsewhere. This is why gas stations across town often have identical prices. Competition is simulated, but not real. The owner bears the risk, the rent, the payroll, the maintenance. The oil company reaps the reward, guaranteed distribution, market presence, and the illusion of ubiquity. It is a model of capitalism that privatizes risk while centralizing profit. Consider the mechanics of this arrangement. The oil giant provides the brand, a Shell or Exxon sign that signals legitimacy to drivers. But this brand comes at a cost: licensing fees, contractual obligations, and strict rules about everything from signage to uniforms. Even the layout of the station may be dictated. How many pumps, what types of food may be sold, even which point-of-sale system must be used. And here we glimpse another paradox. The franchise is marketed as empowerment. Be your own boss. Yet in practice, the owner is bound by contracts so restrictive that autonomy is little more than a veneer. They cannot even freely determine the price of the product most associated with their business. It is entrepreneurship without freedom, risk without sovereignty. We often imagine oil companies as industrial titans, drilling rigs, refineries, tankers crossing oceans. But increasingly, their role in the downstream sector resembles that of landlords. They own the infrastructure, control the branding, dictate supply. The station owner pays them rent, sometimes literally through land leases, but more often figuratively through contractual dependence. This arrangement allows the oil company to minimize its exposure to local market volatility. If sales fall in one station, the owner suffers first. If a station closes, another franchisee can take its place. The oil giant remains insulated. The gas station, then, is not simply a place to buy fuel. It is a mechanism for transferring risk downward while channeling steady streams of income upward. For the owner, entry into this world requires significant capital. To open a franchise often costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes over $1 million, depending on location. Financing this debt chains the owner to the franchise agreement. Even if margins on fuel are negligible, they cannot exit easily. They have sunk costs, they have payroll, they have loans to service. The system ensures compliance not by force, but by economics. The weight of investment becomes its own leash. What emerges is a quiet but profound contradiction. The American cultural myth of the gas station as a family business, the scrappy immigrant family running a roadside pit stop, is real in its labor, but illusory in its sovereignty. The family works, but the corporation dictates. The profits accrue upward, the risks stay local. Drive through any American city and you will see gas stations clustered on corners, sometimes directly across from one another. On the surface, this looks like vigorous competition. Prices differ by a few cents. Customers hunt for bargains. But the reality is stranger. Because franchise agreements tie stations to specific suppliers, there is less true competition than meets the eye. The apparent battlefield is, in fact, a managed ecosystem. It is not that owners are free agents competing in an open market. Rather, they are captives competing inside a cage, each shackled to their supplier. The oil companies orchestrate this dance, ensuring that, regardless of who wins a particular customer, the larger system remains profitable. It is capitalism with the choreography of a rigged game. There are, of course, independent stations, those that buy unbranded fuel on the open market. They often sell for slightly less, appealing to price-conscious drivers, yet they face an uphill battle. Without a recognizable brand, many customers assume their fuel is inferior, even though in most cases, it comes from the same refineries as branded gas. Oil companies exploit this perception. By saturating the landscape with branded stations, they make the independent appear suspicious, marginal. The brand itself becomes a weapon, not just of trust, but of exclusion. The deeper issue here is not just about gas stations. It is about how systems of control operate in late capitalism. How often does the myth of independence conceal structures of dependency? We see it in gig work, where drivers are independent contractors who, in reality, depend entirely on opaque algorithms. We see it in farming, where small growers are trapped into buying seeds and fertilizers from corporate giants. We see it in retail, where mom and pop franchises are little more than storefronts for multinational supply chains. The gas station is one case study in a larger pattern. The individual bears the risk, while the corporation reaps the stability. For the station owner, survival means walking a razor's edge. They cannot profit from gasoline. They are trapped in franchise contracts. Their only escape valve is the convenience store, a space that, as we've seen, thrives on our vices and impulses. Thus, the economic structure of the gas station is not just a story about fuel. It is a story about how systemic design forces survival strategies that ripple outward into the very culture of consumption. It is why stations push cigarettes, sugary drinks, lottery tickets, not because owners necessarily believe in them, but because the system leaves them no choice. The ethical burden is displaced downward as well. The oil company enjoys the brand halo of energy, progress, and mobility. The local owner bears the guilt of selling Marlboros and scratch-offs to a neighborhood in need. What we see, finally, is a cage disguised as freedom. A brightly lit store, a proud sign with a global logo, a family running the counter. From the outside, it looks like agency. From the inside, it feels like obligation. This paradox, the illusion of ownership within the reality of control, is the essence of the franchise model. And it forces us to ask, how much of what we call capitalism is truly free enterprise, and how much is merely the management of dependence? The gas station, humble and overlooked, contains within it a microcosm of the 21st century economy, a system where the image of independence masks the reality of entrapment, where risk is dispersed downward and power consolidated upward. If the history of the gas station is a story of entrapment, and its present a tale of survival through paradox, then its future hovers in a state of profound uncertainty. The gas station as we know it was born of the automobile age, matured under the reign of big oil, and mutated into the convenience hub of modern consumption. But now it faces a crisis not of margins, but of relevance. The question is not whether gas stations will change. The question is whether they will survive at all, and if they do, what form they will take in a society where combustion itself is under threat. The rise of the electric vehicle is framed, often optimistically, as a clean transition. Yet for the gas station, the EV is less a savior than a disruptor. The problem lies not simply in fuel substitution, but in temporal architecture. A gasoline pump dispenses energy in minutes. An EV charger, even at its fastest, requires a longer pause. The gas station was designed for velocity, quick in, quick out, an acceleration point on the journey. Electric vehicles invert this logic. They demand waiting. This waiting reconfigures the very idea of the roadside hub. A driver tethered to a charging station for half an hour is not simply refueling. They are inhabiting space. What should the station become then? A cafe? A co-working lounge? A micro mall? The infrastructure of fueling collides with the infrastructure of living. And with this collision comes an existential question. Is the gas station still a station? Or is it something altogether different? A new node in the geography of daily life. Already in many parts of the world, one can see the slow decay of the traditional station. In rural America, abandoned pumps stand like fossilized ribs of an earlier age. In urban centers, prime real estate is being repurposed. stations demolished, replaced by condos, retail, or parking decks. To contemplate the gas station is to recognize a structure emblematic of a century, an architecture of combustion, acceleration, and mobility. It was never just a place to refuel, it was a point where infrastructure and daily life intersected, a routine embedded in the choreography of modern movement. Yet, like all infrastructures, its permanence was always an illusion. The decline of the gas station is not only a matter of buildings disappearing, it signals a transition in the cultural routines that once seemed fixed. What happens when the canopy lights no longer mark the edge of the highway, or when the sound of the pump fades into memory? Such absences reveal how deeply these places shape the texture of everyday life. Some will argue that the station will simply evolve into EV hubs, convenience spaces, or new hybrids. The gas station, then, is not merely about fuel. It is about the way systems of consumption define our sense of normalcy, until one day they no longer do. To watch its decline is to confront the simple truth that no system, however vast, however ordinary, endures unchanged.